Storm Giants.
A quote from Elminster, Sage of Shadowdale. Humans lack true awareness, and most wouldn't know an omen if it walked up and kissed them on the lips. A storm giant attunes itself to the world and glimpses the future in all things, perceiving moments yet to be. To picture a storm giant is to imagine it in its most common form. The towering behemoth who commands the very essence of elemental fury. Standing at a colossal 26 feet, they are the paramount of giants, embodying the tempestuous might of the storms and the fathomless depths of the sea. Their skin is an otherworldly hue, ranging from pale green to a most beguiling violet, reflecting their ever-shifting colors of a stormy sky or the churning ocean depths. However, do not be mistaken, for these beings are not merely giants of brute strength, but masters of arcane prowess. Their hair cascades in hues of stormy blues and thunderous silver, while their eyes, those piercing orbs, shimmer with enigmatic dances of light. Draped in fine tunics and scale mail, they are much a sight to behold, as they are a brute force to be reckoned with. Their armor is resplendent and covered in runes and enchantments. It pulses with an arcane energy that seems to crackle with every breath. On top of these things, storm giants also possess an intrinsic connection to the elements, commanding lightning with a mere thought, summoning the winds with a casual gesture, and wielding their formidable greatswords with an elegance that belies their colossal size. They often dwell in lofty castles, either upon the highest mountain peaks, amidst the clouds, or beneath the waves and coral palaces of otherworldly beauty. In case I haven't hammered this thought home enough, their intellect is just as formidable as their might. They are deeply versed in arcane arts. They draw upon ancient magics that surpass even the most learned of sorcerers. They see through the veil of reality, perceiving hidden currents of magic with an unerring precision. Their underwater realms, replete with gardens and enchanted treasures, are sanctuaries of both contemplation and power. Yet with all of this power at their fingertips, and despite them being at the top of the giants' ordning, within their own race, they adhere to a distinct hierarchy known as the Ordning of Omens. This sacred practice is more than just a mere tradition. It is a profound system of interpreting the world's subtleties, guiding their actions and decisions with an almost divine precision. In this ordning, omens are not random or trivial occurrences, but deeply significant signs from the elemental forces that the storm giants revere. Each sign is meticulously catalogued, with its meaning and implications carefully analyzed. The storm giants interpret these omens with a blend of ancient wisdom and innate tuition, viewing phenomena like lightning storms, shifting tides, and celestial alignments as a message from the cosmos. The giants reading these omens is an art form, reflecting their connection to the natural world. They study the patterns of the storm, the behavior of sea creatures, and the changes in the weather with a reverence that borders on the mystical. Their interpretations are not merely academic. They guide their governance, shape their societal decisions, and align their personal destinies with the grand tapestry of the universe. In their hands, the language of omens becomes a powerful tool for understanding and influencing the world around them, illustrating the awe-inspiring depth of their connection to the forces they command. With all of this in mind, let's take a look at the 2014 Statblock and see what we can do better. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have finally made it to the top of the ordning. It's been quite the journey to get here, but we're finally here. So, this is the Storm Giant. This is the 2014 Statblock. So,
I guess we're gonna jump into this, hoping that we're gonna see some good out of this. So, we have a huge giant. It is chaotic good. So, unlike cloud giants, storm giants have a natural tendency to be good. I would imagine that's from their innate intelligence and wisdom that they behold, because these giants are the closest to Anam, the Allfather. Let's look at their AC and stats. So we have an armor class of 16 with scale mail, hit points of 230, so that's 30 more than a cloud giant. We have a speed of 50 feet, a swim speed of 50 feet. Now, the speed should still be 60, so you already know we're changing that immediately, but the ability scores are badass on this giant. We have a 29 strength. That is 1 point off of being godlike in terms of strength. That is awesome. These giants should be and will be the most devastating giant that you would fight if you were to ever fight one. They have a bunch of saving throw proficiencies, which they're almost bordering on a legendary creature. We have a plus 14 to strength, plus 10 to con, plus 9 wisdom, plus 9 charisma, and then we have all of these skill proficiencies on top of that: arcana, athletics, history, perception. Though I will say, I think they're missing insight, because if they're making these they're trying to insight the world around them when they read the omens, so I feel like insight is a good skill. You could argue that it's arcana, but I really feel like it would be insight. Let's get into resistances here. So, we have a cold resistance. Now, if you ask me, storm giants should be immune to cold. They live incredibly high up in the sky or incredibly deep in the sea, where it's very cold in both spectrums. They should not be damaged by cold by any stretch of the imagination. They shouldn't be. They are the top, the pinnacle of the giants. They're above cloud giants, they're above fire giants, they're above frost giants. They should have the most immunities and the most ways to avoid damage. So we're going to be changing that. Damage immunities, though, lightning and thunder, that's good. I mean, they could command lightning, so you would imagine that they would be immune to it. So we have a passive perception of 19, very perceptive. They speak common and giant. CR 13, so that's pretty high. It's the highest one we've looked at so far. Proficiency bonus of 5. They are amphibious. They can breathe air and water. And let's get into the actions. So, the giant makes 2 great sword attacks. This giant, I will say, has the most it can do out of all the other giants, which is a good thing. It's just not enough, however. It still falls victim to the same pitfalls as every other giant. It does have a cool recharge ability, but it can make 2 great sword attacks with its multi-attack. It could throw a rock, which does 4d12 damage, might I remind you. That's a lot of damage from a rock. That's pretty awesome. It should be a boulder, obviously. You know me. Back to the great sword really quickly. These giants stand nearly 30 feet tall, and you're telling me that their great sword only has a 10-foot reach? When the sword in their artwork shows that that blade is nearly as tall as them. Assuming the giant is 30 feet tall, which I like to say they're 30 feet because that makes them more Olympian in stature. If the cloud giants were the Greeks, the storm giants are the Greek gods, if we imagine them in that stance. So I had an idea with the great sword that they have, and they could use other weapons too. I actually made 2 different stat blocks because storm giants are known to be in the sea or in the sky, so I made 2 different styles of a storm giant. But let me stop rambling, let me keep moving here. We got a lightning strike, so as a recharge ability they can cast lightning bolt. That is awesome. That is cool. That is staying on the stat block. Everything that I could have ever wanted in that ability is there. It's super flavorful, it's super epic, and that's a 500-foot reach. He can hail these down from the heavens on you. That's pretty awesome. And then they have spell casting, much like the Cloud Giants. Detect magic at will, levitate, light, and they can cast control weather and water breathing. Now you might be saying, why do they need to cast water breathing? They live underwater. It's so that they can cast it on other creatures coming to visit them that don't breathe water. Now this stat block is a lot cooler than all of the other base 2014 giant stat blocks, but I think I can do better. And I think we're going to get into the first DM Dungeon Mastery StormGiant rework right now. Okay, here we are, DM Dungeon Mastery 2024 rework of the 2014 StormGiant. Let me give you a few disclaimers before we jump into this. This is a complicated stat block to run, okay? It kind of has to be, because this giant needs to have a lot of different things it can do. On top of that, this giant is going to be very difficult, as it should be. These are as close as you can get to a godlike being that isn't a god, essentially. Not on the level of a dragon, per se, but these are the children of Anam. These should be terrifying, as I always like to say. I think that's everything, so let's jump into it before my head explodes. The first thing I changed, 60-foot movement speed. Honestly, I could argue that could even be higher because these giants are that big. They are probably right at the top of huge before you transition into gargantuan. That's how I would picture it. So there's part of me that wants to make that movement speed a 70-foot stride, but I refrained from doing it. I wanted to keep all the giants, consistent with each other with their own unique changes. Didn't increase the swim speed. I think 50 feet is perfectly fine for a swim speed, but you could probably increase it if you wanted to. Getting down into the stats, the only thing that may have changed is their saving throws probably have gone up because I increased their challenge rating from 13 all the way up to a whopping 18. They are worth 20,000 experience points if you could manage to somehow slay a storm giant. It's a +6 proficiency bonus, and let's transition into the abilities here. And as we hit the ability section, I remembered what I needed to say. This giant stat block is very expansive, so there is a high likelihood chance that I have possibly made mistakes, screwed things up, possibly made an interaction that's slightly weaker than another interaction, and it doesn't have a place. If you notice one of these things, please mention it in the comments, and then, give me suggestions on what you would do. And I'm not doing this on purpose for comment engagement. I make mistakes sometimes, and then I upload videos, and then people get really, they get very vocal, we'll say, about the mistakes. So, let's get into it. The first change in abilities, innate spellcasting has Chain Lightning now as a once per day ability. I believe that's the only change there. Yeah, and then you'll see the second special trait, Ordning's Hierarchy. The giant has advantage on persuasion, intimidation, and deception checks made to interact with giants of lower rank in the Ordning. So the reason why that's on the stat block is if the players would ever convince a storm giant to come down from their sky castle or come out from their undersea Atlantis-like city, and let's say they need them to come combat some frost giants that are destroying the world with their raiding, the storm giant could intimidate these frost giants incredibly easily. The storm giants are two other giants beneath them. They should bow in recompense when a storm giant is even in their presence. I also remembered really quickly back up to the traits. I gave them an insight proficiency. It's actually an insight expertise because I just remembered that as we're getting down here. Anyways, let's continue. You'll recognize this trait from all of my other giant stat blocks. Rune cast weapons. So, the StormGiant possesses an average affinity for rune casting, infusing their weapons with ancient lightning runes. And then any metal melee weapon they wield deals an extra 2d8 lightning damage on a hit. Makes sense. They are rune casters. They infuse their weapons with runes. That's why you see in the artwork a lot of StormGiants have electrified weapons. It just makes sense. I don't know why Wizards of the Coast is against giants having really cool looking ginormous weapons of their element, but I'm not, so they have it. Let's get into Storm's Stride here, the next trait. The giant ignores difficult terrain, its speed can't be reduced or restricted by magic, and it can use 5 feet of movement to escape non-magical restraints or a grapple. If this effect is dispelled, the StormGiant can reactivate it on its next turn as a free action. So, yeah, you're not stopping the pinnacle of the giants coming down on you. You better have a plan, and you better have some potions on you that are going to reduce damage from getting hit from this giant, because you're not going to cast Grasping Vine and hold the giant in place. I don't think Grasping Vine does that, or it might, I'm not sure, but that's just an example. These are nearly godlike beings. You're going to have to come up with something better than that. Let's move into their special Ordening trait, the Ordening of Omens. And I took this directly from their lore. Every giant has an Ordening that they adhere to. This is the StormGiants. So, StormGiants adhere to ancient tradition of interpreting omens to grasp the fates of the world. After spending 24 hours studying natural phenomena such as bird flight patterns, sand shapes, or cloud formations, and those are just examples, there's other things too, the StormGiant can make a DC 25 insight check. On a success, they cast legend lore without using a spell slot, gaining profound insights into significant world events, cosmic shifts, and their place within the grand tapestry of existence. So, StormGiants are almost like sages in a way. Soothsayers. On top of all their other abilities, they can sort of be diviners and look into the future, try to read the omens, see fates. This gives your players a reason to seek a StormGiant out. And StormGiants are very reclusive, so there's usually only one of them, keep in mind, unless they live in a family. They're not going to live in a giant society, sort of how you would see cloud giants live, where they live in a giant cloud city. A StormGiant would live with, in Storm King's Thunder, for example, I believe the StormGiant in that module lives with his daughters. So it makes sense that they're these very sparse beings, but they should be very powerful if you even run into one of them. But these are just ways to kind of get your players to interact with a StormGiant, especially if you really want to run one, because I absolutely do. And then we'll get into their final special trait here, Mythic Resistance. So if you've seen my Hydra, you're familiar with this one. I didn't give them a legendary thing, because they're not every commoner StormGiant would be legendary, but I think every commoner StormGiant would be mythic in its rarity, which gives them the ability, if they fail a saving throw, they can choose to add +10 to the roll instead, in addition to its saving throw modifiers. So this is worse than legendary resistance, because if they roll a 1, they still fail. So there's still a chance. It's more fair, quote unquote, it's more fair. They're still most likely going to pass more often than not, but there's still that off chance that they fail when the dice decide to tell the story. With all of that in mind, we're going to move into the actions, and this is where things are going to get pretty wacky. Alright, here we go. I hope you guys are ready. Get strapped in for this one, because these are some pretty devastating actions. So the giant makes 2 great sword attacks or 2 fist attacks in any combination. It may replace one of these with a stomp or frost gale. Yes, stomp enjoyers. Stomp is still here. I'm making up the notion that there's stomp enjoyers out there, and that's going to be a meme forever on my channel now, every time I make something with a stomp. Anyways, let's get into the Colossal Greatsword. Not a huge greatsword, a Colossal Greatsword. Look at the artwork. Look how big that sword is. That is enough to cleave through a building. Anyways, let's get into how this sword works. It's got a plus 15 to hit. It's got a reach of 20 feet. Here is what separates the Storm Giant from the other giants. You can rant and rave and say this is overpowered all you want. I am not budging on this one. The Storm Giant makes a single attack roll and affects all large or smaller creatures within a 20-foot cone. So yes, their attack rolls are made in cones. And they can choose not to do this. So if they have allies or creatures of, of friendly nature, like let's say they roll over some serfs below them or something like that, they could choose to not swing on those creatures. But anyways, on a hit, it is 6d8 slashing damage, not 6d6, 6d8. This is a colossal greatsword, guys. Think about it. They need to be dealing a lot of damage, okay? This is a late game creature. If your characters are level 17, 18, 19, 20 and fighting this, the damage needs to be incredibly high. It needs to feel like you're fighting a being that is born of the gods. So that's just me pleading my case, just in case anybody's seeing that and going, what? No way, that's BS. Anyways, each large or smaller creature that is hit within this cone has to succeed on a DC 23 strength save or fall prone. And then it says, just for a reminder, huge or smaller creatures, the Storm Giant attacks. Actually, sorry, huge or larger creatures, the Storm Giant attacks makes a normal attack roll, targeting only that creature without affecting others. So he can't make these huge sweeping cone attacks when he's fighting something like a dragon. He's only able to hit the dragon. If it makes sense, it would stop the momentum of the swinging sword if the dragon was there, which, by the way, Storm Giants are a perfect candidate for when your players need help fighting an ancient dragon, or a worm, which is above ancient dragons, if you're not aware of that. But let's get into the boulder now. And you've noticed immediately, this is not just a boulder. This is not just a rock. This is a colossal boulder. It does 4d12 bludgeoning damage. If the target is large or smaller, it is hindered. I'm changing the dazed condition to hindered because it makes more sense. Hindered means your speed is reduced by 5 feet until the end of your next turn, but on top of that, this is even stronger than a stone giant boulder because now the creature must succeed on a DC 23 strength save or fall prone and be pinned under the boulder. Escape DC 23. Yeah, I'll put artwork of a storm giant boulder on the screen. They are huge boulders. They have a coral reef looking chunk of boulder for the example, but if they're up in the mountains, it's probably the tip of the mountain range they're throwing down at you. So it only makes sense if you're small, you're gonna get plastered by that boulder and held underneath of it until you can get out from underneath of it. So by himself, the Storm Giant is very powerful against beings that are smaller than it. But these are good giants, remember. They're not necessarily gonna attack the world, but you could make this a final boss of your campaign if you wanted to say the max level of your campaign was 17 or 18. This is a good candidate, I think. Especially if you have multiple of them, or this giant commanding other giants beneath him. Absolutely devastating. Let's move into the rest of the actions. Now, this is Frost Gale. This is something that I think I took a cantrip and I slightly tweaked it and reflavored it into this, but I increased the cone range on it. I can't remember if it was Acid Splash or it may have been Acid Splash. I think it is Acid Splash. I reworked it into Frost Gale. So storm giants can control storms, obviously. I wanted a consistent way that they could make a freezing gale of cold. This is why I gave them cold immunity also, because it makes sense. If they can cause storms, especially snowstorms, it just is a flavorful ability. So the Storm Giant conjures a vicious gale of snow and freezing rain in a 20-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a DC 18 con save. On a failed save, the creature takes 4d12 cold damage. If it's not resistant to cold damage, it has disadvantage on its next weapon attack roll made before the end of its next turn, but on a success, they take half as much damage and they suffer no effects. So remember, The giant can swing his greatsword, and then in that same multi-attack use Frost Gale. Or he can just make 2 greatsword attacks. It's up to him, but they both deal the similar amounts of damage, but they cause different effects. The greatsword is for damage, whereas Frost Gale is for crowd control. It's for stopping and slowing creatures, maybe even a warning. You better stop coming towards me or you're gonna get slammed. And it's got the 20-foot cone, so they have the same range. I think that's a cool ability. It's a spell-like ability as an action. Let's keep going though. We have Lightning Strike. It's the same exact thing. I did not want to take that off the stat block. It's too iconic for the Storm Giant. So moving on to the next thing. Now this is a unique ability from me. This is a spell that I transformed into a spell-like ability. This is there once per day. This is Conjure Storm. The Storm Giant summons a storm of crackling, lightning, thunder, and cold wind in a location within 120 feet that it can see. The storm consists of up to 10 10-foot cubes, which the giant can arrange as it wishes. Each cube has to be touching at least one other cube, however. And then each creature in the area must make a DC 18 Dex save, taking 10d8 damage of the giant's choice, lightning, cold, or thunder, on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. So you flavor that as the giant decides what type of storm is happening. He's conjuring it above the characters' heads. They make the dex save in an attempt to get out of the way, otherwise they get blasted with an incredibly loud, thunderous boom down in that area, localized, an incredibly cold gale of wind that assails them, or lightning strikes just start slamming down in that area. And this is such a cool narrative ability that you could describe as a dungeon master that'll probably make your players go, "Oh my god, what's happening?" Yeah, I'm excited for this one. Storm Giants are pretty cool, and it's been a long time coming to get up to the top of the ordning finally, so I'm trying to make these abilities as bombastic and impactful as possible. Every attack should feel like there is so much weight behind it. Let's get into Thunderous Stomp. Not just Stomp, Thunderous Stomp. Has a reach of 5 feet. It does 5d4 bludgeoning damage. If the target is large or smaller, it has to succeed on a DC 23 strength save or fall prone. But a shockwave radiates in a 10-foot radius from the target, forcing all other large or smaller creatures within the area to also succeed on a DC 23 strength save or be knocked prone. So, yeah, big AoEs, ginormous impacts from a 30-foot tall giant that is muscle-bound and Zeus-like. Probably going to make a humongous shockwave of just force that knocks things down. Thunderous Fist is our next ability. It's got a 5-foot reach, does 5d6 bludgeoning damage. If the creature is large or smaller, it has to succeed on a DC 23 Constitution saving throw or be staggered. Now, staggered is really bad, because if you get staggered, you can't take actions, and you may take a bonus action or move up to your speed, but not both until the end of your next turn. So if you get hit with that, you're on Dream Street for a turn, and you need to make sure you get away or somewhere where you can recover from that, because that's pretty devastating. And it's a DC 23, so you're more than likely going to fail that every time unless you roll a nat 20 or you're a fighter or a dwarf with very high constitution. So the giant has options to fight all character types. Let's get into Snatch. So here we are. It's the same Snatch as all the other giants. They have the creature within 10 feet of him must succeed on a DC 23 Dex save. On a failure, the creature is grappled and restrained, and then he can't grapple another creature with that hand or swing his two-handed weapons until this grapple ends. He could still have his two-handed weapon in his other hand, however, just keep that in mind. He just cannot swing it. Now, with Snatch, when he's holding something, here's where we transition into our bonus actions. Alright, here we go. Get ready for this. So we have, instead of Crush, it's Shocking Crush. Now, I took it's a cantrip. Shocking Grasp, I believe it's called. Yeah, I took Shocking Grasp and I put it on Shocking Crush at the highest level that it could be cast at. So the giant crushes you and you take 4d6 bludgeoning damage plus another 18 lightning damage, and you can't take reactions until the start of your next turn and you remain grappled. Now the reactions part really isn't going to be that big of a thing, but if the creature gets dropped for whatever reason, the player's not going to be able to react if they go falling from the hand now. It's like they got tased by, a ton of volts of electricity. Now we get into Thunderous Slam. This is exactly the same as the Cloud Giant's Thunderous Slam, because I felt that was a very fitting ability for the giant. So he slams you into a wall or an object nearby with Mighty Force, dealing 4d6 bludgeoning damage plus 2d8 thunder damage. Picture everything that this giant does is causing an anime-like delayed, extremely explosive shockwave. Just everything it does. Attack on Titan style. I've never watched Attack on Titan, but I've seen clips of it. Sorry, Attack on Titan fans. If they fail that saving throw, though, they get stunned, and then they are no longer grappled, obviously, as he slams you into a wall. So lots of crowd control, especially against smaller creatures, exactly how it should be. He should be able to overpower and absolutely devastate creatures that are smaller than him. He is a giant. He is the tallest giant. Let's get into Colossal Fling now. Not just Fling, it's Colossal. Now, there was a part of me that wanted to make this range about what he could throw a boulder at, but for the sake of balance, it's up from 60 feet to 80 feet now. So he can throw you 80 feet in a direction of his choice, and you take 1d10 bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet thrown, and then you land prone. If you're thrown at another creature, you have to succeed on a DC 23 dexterity saving throw or take the same amount of damage and be knocked prone. Yeah, he's pretty scary, and we haven't even gotten to his finishing maneuver yet. So here we go. This one's probably going to be controversial. It's probably going to make a lot of people mad. Yeah, to be honest with you, I think it works for the giant. So as he's holding you, this is called Thunderous Judgment. He glares at you with a crackling blue energy coming out of his eyes. He holds you high towards the sky, and he conjures a gargantuan storm cloud that strikes you with a colossal bolt of lightning. You have to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a success, you take 10d10 lightning damage. On a failure, you drop 0 hit points and fall unconscious, and then he drops you within 5 feet, regardless on if you succeed or pass. Yes. And it's a recharge, though, so it's a recharge 6, so you can't use that every turn, and it's got a very low chance of recharging. But that is a perfect coup de grace ability for the Storm Giant, in my opinion. He's focusing all of his remaining power into calling the heavens down on you and striking you with a gargantuan bolt of lightning. Obviously, you're gonna get knocked unconscious from that. It's crazy. I think that fits. It's very befitting, and it's, even if you're a character that stacks like 200 hit points or something, this giant is still dangerous to you. Not that it wasn't before, but that was sort of my idea with Thunderous Judgment. There's creatures like hags that have a death glare. I think the sea hag has a death glare that can instantly drop you to 0 hit points. Why doesn't his CR18 have something like that? I'm giving it to him, okay? You know what? Don't shoot the messenger, alright? It's on there. You can take it off if you disagree with it. I think it's an awesome ability. But with all of that, that's going to conclude our Storm Giant that lives in the skies. I have a variant stat block for you for a Storm Giant that lives in the seas. So let's get into that stat block. Alright, here we are. The Storm Giant of the seas. Now, this giant is sort of just reflavored, but he's got a lot different styled abilities. Some of them are honestly more devastating than the other giants, but it requires the creature to be in the sea, so sort of limited because of that. But I would imagine he would still be able to do all the other things the other giant can do, but this is specifically for living in the sea, so you're probably going to see this stuff more often than not. So let's get into the actions. Everything else other than the actions and the bonus actions are the same. So we have a Colossal Trident. It makes 2 trident attacks with this, and this works instead of a giant cone. It's a 30-foot reach and a 10-foot wide line that can pierce through creatures. It's a Colossal Trident. He's essentially jabbing at you with the Empire State Building. Probably not something that big, but something similar to that aspect. He should be able to... It's the same design philosophy as the Greatsword. You could disagree with it, you could take that off if you don't want it to be on there like that, but it's a line, so it's not going to hit the whole party anyways. It could just hit creatures that are really far away. That's it for the melee attack. We'll get into some of the sea-based actions here. We have Conjure Storm is the same, so that would be something that it's doing above water. Now, we have 2 more abilities for like above water. I didn't do very many underwater stuff, but you could still reflavor this stuff to work underwater. But let's do Rogue Wave first. This is this giant's recharge ability instead of Lightning Bolt, but I did add Lightning Bolt to its spell casting, so it still has the ability to do that. Anyways, the giant conjures a massive wave of icy water that moves out in a 60-foot long, 50-foot tall line from the giant, and it goes out to 100 feet. So it's got a 100-foot range, and it's 60-foot long and 50-foot tall. Each creature in the wave's path must make a DC 23 strength save. On a failure, the creature takes 3d12 cold damage and 3d12 bludgeoning damage, and you're pulled 30 feet underwater from the force of the wave hitting you. You could even make that deeper. You could make that 60 feet if you wanted to, which might even make more sense, but for balancing purposes, I set it to 30 feet. Now that I'm looking at it, it probably would be fine setting it. I could probably set it up to 80 feet. Anyways, on a success, the creature takes half as much damage and is not pulled underwater, so we can't use that every turn. It's a recharge ability. Now we have Water Spout. These things are... I don't know why, there's something about Water Spouts ever since Assassin's Creed Black Flag that just terrify me. They're just such a scary force of nature, so I was like, yeah, I think the StormGiant of the Sea needs something of that nature. So the StormGiant conjures a 20-foot radius, 30-foot high water spout on the water's surface within 300 feet. The spout lasts for 1 minute and requires concentration, and then the giant can move it up to 30 feet on its turn. Creatures in the spout's area or that enter it must make a DC 23 dex save. On a failure, they take 10d6 bludgeoning damage. They are pulled into the spout and they become blinded, deafened, and restrained. They are lifted 10 feet higher at the start of each of their turns. If they reach the top, they are hurled 3d6 times 10 feet away at random. So they get sucked into this, essentially it's a tornado of water. They get pulled up to the top of it and they just get tossed out up to very high range away in random directions. So it's like you're getting sucked into a tornado. If they succeed the save, so they don't get sucked in, they move to a space within 5 feet of the spout. Restrained creatures can use their action to make a DC 23 Strength or Dex check to escape, and then they are hurled 3d6 times 10 feet if they're even successful at that. So it's a pretty devastating thing. It requires concentration, so if you hit the giant enough times, it could fail its con save and drop that, but it's not even a spell, so it could just keep recasting it. Yeah, pretty scary, pretty fun, interactive, terrifying ability. Don't make a StormGiant mad, that's what I can tell you. Let's move into the bonus actions for the StormGiant of the Seas. Now you'll see there is no Thunderous Slam here because there's really not much to slam something into out in the middle of the ocean, other than the ship, but I took it off just because, to save room on the stat block, assuming you're fighting him underwater or something. Him or her, sorry. Everything is the same there except instead of the other ability, instead of Thunderous Judgment, we have Maelstrom of Charybdis, which is a Odyssey reference. But how this works is it's a recharge ability, so this is this giant's version of the coup de grace. The Storm Giant channels the fury of the abyss through its grasp while grappling a creature underwater. If the target has 100 hit points or fewer, it takes the full brunt of the storm's rage. Its speed is reduced by 10 feet. It has disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws, except for Constitution. If it attempts to cast a spell, it must succeed on a con save or the spell fails. The target can make a Constitution saving throw DC 18 at the end of each of its turns to end the effect. The target is then dropped prone within 5 feet of the giant. Yeah, that's this giant. It's not as devastating as the other giant where it just does a ton of damage and kills you if you fail, but this one debilitates you, so it's like, you know, he imbues the sea to assail you underwater, and then he lets go of you, and then the seas just keep attacking you until you succeed a Constitution saving throw, essentially. It could be probably worded differently. This is essentially Power Word Stun on a recharge. I know it seems overpowered, I know, but this is a CR18 monster that we're playing with here, and high-level Dungeons and Dragons tends to be so difficult for Dungeon Masters to the point that most games, on average, end at level 7 because no Dungeon Masters want to step into the realm of high-level D&D, and I think part of that problem is because creatures are not strong enough at higher levels to deal with high-level characters. When your characters have Disintegrate, Wish spells, Power Word Kill, etc., stuff like that makes it really hard for a creature like this to deal with when they don't have abilities like this. But now, I am essentially slowly scaling up the later game even higher. I'm making the ceiling of difficulty much higher in the late game creatures, that's just my design philosophy. Again, my creature stat blocks are a template for you to use, give you ideas, and if you disagree with them, you can always change stuff. I have the creature stat blocks on my Discord, free to download. You just gotta join the link in the description. I am probably gonna reword Maelstrom of Charybdis, so you guys don't have to worry about that. Before I upload it, I will fix the wording on that, but this has been Storm Giants by DM Dungeon Mastery. Let me know how you guys feel. Sorry about the rambling. I was excited for this one. And I will catch you guys in the next video.